Dear deep sea fishers of Reddit, what's the strangest thing you've seen heard on the open ocean? While on a sailing cruise returning to Miami from the Bahamas, I was permitted to pilot the boat while the crew sat down for dinner. I was told to simply follow a certain heading on the compass. As we were going along, I noticed the position of the sun was rather rapidly changing as I was chasing the heading on the compass. I returned to what I thought was the correct heading and watched in amazement as the compass began to spin in circles. We had been scuba diving, so several of us had compasses and they were all exhibiting the same behavior. The heading on the GPS was unaffected. After maybe 10-20 seconds, the spin slowed to a stop back on the correct heading. The crew logged the coordinates of the anomaly. The best guess we had was that we'd crossed over an old shipwreck. Perhaps something hauling a large amount of some magnetic metal over to the Bahamas. How do we know these stories are true? I mean, these are fishermen telling them. A couple that are friends with my parents sailed from France to Africa then to South America. They also didn't have all the proper equipment you are supposed to have in order to do this legally and as safe as possible. They were a week or two away from the end of their trip when they confirmed their feeling of not being alone. At night they'd think they'd hear another ship but no sight of anything. They'd hear water breaking from something but never saw why. This continued and seemed to be getting closer. Then just a few days before the end of their trip, an American submarine suddenly surfaced near them. It stayed afloat for a while then went back under. His theory was since they didn't have a proper sat radio, they weren't aware they were being hailed to identify. The American Navy was probably like, WTF is this, and kept track of them or even followed them for days, weeks. At the end the Americans were probably even more curious. Surfaced. Saw a bewildered sunburnt French sailing couple. Not a fisher. But spent some time at sea. Used to work on an oceanographic research vessel. Doing box cores and piston cores of the ocean floor, brought up all kinds of things. Coke cans. A magic marker. Etc. If you're on an old steamer trade route, you bring up a lot of clinker coal. Which is the burnt up coal from the old boilers that they put over the side. It's possible to analyze the clinker coal and determine what general area it was mined in England or Europe, the USA, etc. One fun thing we used to do was lash a small net bag to the cable that held the box core. And we'd put styrofoam cups in it. As the box core and its cable would ascend, sometimes several thousand fathoms, the cups would compress due to the pressure. We'd haul up the box core and in the bag would be perfect little styrofoam cups, one stroke too high. We had hundreds of them. Also once saw a whale swimming by mid-Atlantic. That was trailing a load of fishing gear, nets and some high flares. Was not pleasant to see. AskReddit is full of repeated questions that never end. However, this is a question that surfaces every few months and I love reading through them. Thanks OP. Surfaces. I'm a marine biologist. While at uni I went out to the deep ocean on a scientific cruise. We were trawling about 800 meters. Pulled up the catch. I found a hermit crab. What was cool about this was it wasn't in a mollusk shell but was in a hard anemone. The anemone had a bottom part that was hard and hollow, perfectly fitted for the crab. On top was 2 clusters of stingers. It was an awesome little symbiotic relationship in which the anemone gave the hermit crab shelter and protection and the crab presumably moved the anemone to food. Anyway, I tagged and bagged it for another scientist to look at. I never followed what happened with it. I tried to search if it had been discovered. I couldn't find anything. It could have been a unique discovery. One time I shot this albatross with my crossbow. I saw some shit afterwards. Let me tell ya. I can't believe I'm so late to this question. I do quite a bit of saltwater fishing. And anytime I'm on a chartered boat, I always ask this question to the captain. On a blackfin tuna trip out of Key West 3 years ago, I asked the question. And without thinking, or blinking really, the captain said, a dead elephant in the middle of the ocean. I'll never forget that. Same captain also told me that while tied behind a shrimp boat not far offshore, his client pulled up a large grouper with a human knee joint and muscle flesh inside its mouth. They went back to shore and contacted the appropriate authorities to let them know a shrimper had possibly dismembered someone and tossed them into the ocean. Weird stuff. I wish there were more responses to this thread. I'm not a deep sea fisherman, so I have nothing to contribute other than upvotes. I was fishing off the coast of Malaysia in the middle of the night. Suddenly, the night sky brightened and I saw a bright glowing orb appear to the bow. The orb moved slowly across the sky, leaving a bright yellow trail and seemed to have sparks coming off it for about 20 seconds before disappearing into the night. After getting back to shore, I learned that it was a retired Japanese satellite ray entering the atmosphere. Same thing happened to me off the coast of Australia. We were fishing in the dark, and then gradually the night sky brightened, and I saw a bright glowing orb appear to the bow. The orb moved slowly across the sky and gave off a tremendous amount of heat. After getting back to shore, we realized it was now Sunday. I do a lot of night fishing off of SC and FL. I get a lot of fish that are bitten in half by sharks. Some of them had to have been very, very large. When you reel in a large sport fish's head like some kind of sequel to The Old Man and the Sea and realize the shark is close to half the size of your boat miles and miles offshore, essentially in the middle of nowhere, you get more than a little freaked out. I'm a diver. We were doing a night dive on the Great Barrier Reef when we came up to a cave-like structure, really just a rock formation, which is known for turtles. We shine our flashlights inside and see these huge F-King flippers. In there was a 100-year-old turtle about the size of a small car in diameter. This isn't anything like the supernatural stories that you were probably after, but I found it very strange. Edit. We knew the age because we were told beforehand that there was a large 100-year-old turtle in the area. We weren't expecting anything as big as we saw. However, I was sitting in a little boat off Gran Canaria once when I heard a strange whirring noise, like when kids stick playing cards through the spokes on their bike. I heard it a few times and wondered what it was. And then it hit me. It was a flying fish. It literally hit me, and then floundered around the boat for a few seconds before I picked it up and hurled it back. Those things are goddamned weird. Its wings were gross. A friend's cousin is a tuna fisherman. They found a deer swimming over 100 miles off the coast of New Zealand a few years ago. Don't mind me. Just devolving here. I was on a dive boat off the coast of the Big Island in Hawaii last week. It was after dark and a pod of dolphins were spending a lot of time playing around off our stern. They were pretty interested in us, it seemed, since every once in a while you could see a head pop up and just sort of look at us for a few seconds. Pretty much everyone was hanging out on the dive platform on the stern when suddenly this huge manta ray comes right up to the surface about 5 feet away from the boat. It was easily 10 feet wide. It did a quick flip and was gone in a few seconds. It wasn't too freaky as we'd been night diving with them a few nights before that, but I could see how someone who wasn't aware of them would get really freaked out. The ocean has a lot of weird stuff in it. Not fishing, but Navy well off the coast of Malaysia. Found a corpse which was incredibly bloated and when rolled over had no face. We named him Bob. Went calabash fishing last year off Maitali Beach. About 8 miles out in open water, we were just sitting there trolling at a slow rate when we heard this humming noise. It rattled the boat a good bit. IDK if it was under it or nearby or what it was really. But it wasn't loud. It went on for maybe 20-30 seconds, then it was gone. Everyone heard it and said something about it. Couldn't have been the boat. The boat didn't sound like that. Pretty weird. We would occasionally hear Navy nuke subs going in and out of Coronado and this is exactly what they sound. It's pretty subsonic, like. Once we hit 3 kelp balls in a row and caught more fish than I thought possible. I am envious of the stories I hear about times where the boat was too full. But one time it happened. I saw a man shitting in a 5-gallon bucket on a 35-foot contender 100 miles offshore. He waved. I have been out in the open ocean, no land or other boats around, and the sea was perfectly calm on a clear day. Our boat was only small and it was not moving at all. It was perfectly still. There was no wind. The water surface looked like glass. It was eerie and slightly disturbing. Only comfort was I was not alone and we were not a sailboat. One was an abandoned boat floating past us in the night. From some of these responses I'm starting to wonder if people in submarines just enjoy f***ing with people on boats. I worked on offshore oil drilling rigs in the Gulf of Mexico for a number of years. I know I saw a lot of things that were interesting to me. But I don't know about anyone else. The one thing that sticks in my mind right this minute is standing on the empty bow of the barge, 150 miles off of the coast of Louisiana, and seeing a flight of huge manta rays swim fly by below me in a jet-like V formation. I think there were maybe 9 of them together. And it was beautiful. So, me being a 19-year-old, I chunked a big piece of metal off the barge at them. A drop of about 90 feet. I didn't hit any. But they peeled off and dove just like a formation of jet fighters going down in an attack. I had no idea they behaved like that. I've never heard of anyone else mentioning seeing it before either. Have any of you?